Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Inspiration Podcast Show. As always, my name is Usman, your host, and alhamdulillah, I'm so happy that you're here today to join us for what is a super interesting episode with a super interesting guest, actually, mashallah, whose name is Hira Hashmi, a 19-year-old sister who studies molecular biology in Colorado in the US, who actually got a bit Twitter famous and actually popular in her local community and recognised for something she did in response to a statement made by her colleague, which was, why don't Muslims condemn the acts of violence that happen in the name of religion? So she was like, went home, spent about 3 weeks, and came up with the most epic response. And so in this episode, inshallah, you're going to find out exactly what she did, what inspired her to do it, and why many young Muslims around the world are now inspired by her work and her project, MuslimsCondemn.com. That's coming up. Allah, 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 Allah. Now, before we get into today's show, inshallah, I want to remind you that today's episode is sponsored by the Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Research. In the current climate, Islam has been cast as irrational, incompatible with modern civilization, and inherently violent. Yaqeen Institute is a non-profit research initiative that is the voice of the Muslim community reclaiming their narrative. Their team provides well-researched answers on Islam by Muslims themselves who aim to address relevant topics head-on with the help of the foremost experts in this space. So go ahead and check out Yaqeen Institute in the link in the description below, and if you believe in their cause, go ahead and support them by donating because they are a charity as well. Okay, now on to the episode. Alright guys, so let's bring on our sister Hira, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the Inspiration Podcast Show.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure to have you. And before we started the show, we did talk a little bit, and you said to me that, I'm not much of an inspiration, but I want to start off by reminding you that you are. And so I just want to thank you so much for taking time out. And the guys know a little bit about your story. But before we get into the main show today, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I am a sleep-deprived college student, but beyond that, I was born in India. I was born in North India, and I moved to the US when I was very young. I live with my family, 2 younger sisters. Currently, I am a junior at CU Boulder. I'm studying molecular cellular developmental biology and linguistics, so I'm double majoring, inshallah. Inshallah being keyword.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Outside of my studies, I like to do a lot of community service and activism, whether it's taking part in a lot of protests for social justice or making meals for the homeless, things like that. I think, alhamdulillah, I have a lot of free time, and I think it's good to put it to use by serving the community.
Cool. So the reason that I found you, and I think that a lot of people found you, is because you did something really, really epic, which was by far one of the coolest things I've seen when it comes to responding to ignorance, really, when it comes to the idea that Muslims, don't condemn acts of violence in the name of religion. And what you did was something quite, not just reactionary, but very specific, very clever. And you backed it up with facts, right? So talk to us a little bit about your famous Muslims Condemn list and your inspiration behind doing it in the first place.
Yeah. So, shout out to my language arts teacher. She will be very proud that I cited everything. She always told us to source everything. So I like to say I love facts and I love data. And I truly believe that a lot of the information out there is not coming from a place of knowledge. So last year, there was an incident in class where it was a history class. So obviously we were talking about the history of religion and, violence done in the name of religion. And there was a particular student who was sitting close to me, and he noticed, my hijab, it kind of screams out, I'm Muslim. There's really not any place for debate. And so he asked me about this, and I told him, it's not really fair to hold an entire religion responsible for the acts of a few people. But he didn't really understand that, and I got very frustrated, and I kind of feel bad that I said this to him, but I got very frustrated, and I just told him very sarcastically, why don't you Google it? Are your fingers not working or something? So, I mean, I went home very frustrated, and I decided, maybe I'll just send him a few links about Islam and send him a few links on scholars and sheikhs and people who are very influential in the Muslim world coming out against this and saying, hey, this is not a part of our religion. Islam is very beautiful. It's very peaceful. And these are just a few people who are, twisting things to suit their own agenda. And when I started researching this, I found out there wasn't really any comprehensive list. Normally, they just came out after certain attacks. There would be a list of here are some Muslim leaders speaking out against this. And so I decided to compile it into a Word doc just to keep track of all these different links. And eventually I realized, and I love spreadsheets. I don't know if that's obvious, but I realized that it'd be easier to just document it on a spreadsheet and have it easy, just the date, who said what, and then what the topic of whatever they were condemning was, and then the link. And within 3 weeks, I went down a very big rabbit hole. And 3 weeks later, it was over 700 pages long.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many sleepless nights was that to compile 700 plus pages?
Not very many. I mean, don't tell my mom this, but I kind of skip class. The only time I skip class is to study for another class. So I don't know how this works. This is how college works. But it went really fast, actually. And I think that just speaks, that's the point. It speaks volumes to how active we are and how vocal we are. The fact that I was able to find so many things in such a short amount of time. And after that, I talked to my friend, and she was like, this would be a really good thing for the public to have. It's a lot of good information, and it could be used as a resource. And so we just kind of brainstormed some ideas, and she was like, the easiest, anytime anyone wants to make something public, just tweet about it. And I was like, that's a really good idea. So I put it on Twitter, and 12 hours later, I woke up and there were so many responses and retweets and news requests from Teen Vogue and 17 and Huffington Post. And it really just snowballed from there.
I mean, I think it deserves to, because you said that, it's just a few Google clicks away and people could go and make the effort, but no one has done, I think, in that way. And because you are a young Muslim living in America, and, you could easily have an outburst, you could easily just have responses that aren't very structured, but more angry. But instead you went back home, you sat at your computer and you thought, okay, let's do this properly. And you researched correctly. You made a spreadsheet, which is great, not just lots of angry emojis and tweets and Facebook comments, which I think, by the way, are one of the worst places to debate about this. And you put it together, and then you let people just see it for themselves, right? And that's what I think is pretty powerful.
Yes. No, I'm glad you say that, because there was that moment of anger. And that was my thought process. I was like, I could ignore this. I don't have to deal with this. I can just never talk to the student again. But it wasn't just about him. It was a reflection of a lot of other people I've encountered, and even just sitting here and watching the news, that this is something that people really believe, is they, we're not doing anything about this problem, when from my perspective, my reality has been our community is very active. We're the first people to respond to things like this. We're the first people to go out and help. And I kind of wanted to show that this is a huge misconception. And so once I got over the anger, I was like, what can I do that will actually make a difference, instead of, I still do. Sometimes I make angry Facebook comments and things like that, because it's so easy to do.
We all do.
But when you put in that effort, we all do. We we have to overcome our nafs. But when you put in that effort, I think that really shows people on the other side that we are willing to listen, and we are going to help them. And I think and that's what I met a lot of people after that who said, I still think this and this about Islam, but the fact that you are so willing to listen and give feedback, I think that's sometimes the important part. And it comes back down to dawah and just sharing Islam with other people. It's not about facts so much. Yes, this is all factual, but at the same time, it really comes down to winning them over with their hearts, and moving their hearts, really, instead of just throwing a bunch of facts at them, which is what I guess I did.
Yeah, but I think in turn, like you said before, the snowball effect with the retweets, I think as a byproduct of this list, you then start making people think. And, once they see this, they might end up speaking to their Muslim friends about it. They might do some more research. And as a result, they do see people's character and then the true beauty of Islam. We're going to get onto that in a moment, inshallah. But before that, recently I followed you on Twitter, so I know this. You won a pretty prestigious award, and you were side by side with Imam Omar Suleiman. So go ahead and brag about that for a couple of minutes, and then I'll talk to you about
brag about that. Oh, alhamdulillah. So Yaqeen Institute, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with it, so I'll talk about it a little bit. They were founded last year by Imam Omar Suleiman, and it's an institute that is dedicated to Islamic research. So a lot of these topics you hear in the media, these buzzwords, a lot of the times there's not accurate information on it, especially in English. So he kind of developed this institute that looks at research, looks at facts, looks at current issues. So I mean, that's what I love as well. So in April, he found out about my list as well after there was a Guardian article that came out. And he encouraged me to apply for the Confident Muslim program, which is a part of Yaqeen Institute. And it's a branch that focuses on youth who are making differences. So there was, all the applicants, we had some sort of project that was our goal was to contribute to society in a positive way through the lens of our Islamic history and in our Islamic knowledge. So he encouraged me to do that. So alhamdulillah, I got in and I was able to speak at ICNA Mass, which is the largest convention of Muslims in America. It's a lot of fun. A lot of Muslims in one place, a lot of hummus and a lot of falafel and biryani. So a lot of good
no
food.
Big deal. Yani, just a massive conference. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So I was, one of the sessions I got to do, so that was what I got to do. I got to give a 10-minute lecture. There were like 7,000 people in the audience. It was so nerve-wracking. And there was a Jumbotron with my face on it.
You did good. I saw it. You did really good.
Alhamdulillah, jazakumullah khair. I was so nervous, but I practiced. I had 9 days to prepare for that. I found out 9 days before the event.
And then 9 seconds before you forget everything, right?
Yes, of course. I forgot in the middle. I was like, what? But yeah, so I was able to speak there. And so the convention happens twice a year. And I believe they have 3 applicants per convention. So so you have about 6 people, and this is the first year that the award was given. So as far as I know, out of those 6 people, 1 person gets the Yaqeen Award, Muhammad Ali Confident Muslim. So I was the award winner this year. So they called me into Dallas. I got to have lunch with the daughter of Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X and Imam Omar Suleiman. Yeah.
So and again, no big deal, right? Just casual.
No big deal. I'm so confused. I still don't believe it happened, but alhamdulillah. And then that night they had the banquet. So they had the plaque and everything. So that's in the
awesome.
Purpose of the award was really to recognize youth who are doing their part to extend the legacies of Muhammad Ali. As we know, he was such an important figure in American Muslim history and American history. He did so much and was so active and kind of in that. He was such a trailblazer, and so they want to kind of recognize and support youth who are doing a similar thing, who are trying to make their mark on the world and by doing good and serving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by serving the people.
Amazing. Do you know what? I'm so even more impressed now after your story. I saw that you won it. I saw your talk, but I didn't know much of the history behind why. And so I'm so glad that you were involved, and mashallah, you went on to win. And we'll put all the information, inshallah, for the Yaqeen Institute and the conference and the award in today's show notes, inshallah, which you guys can go and check out afterwards. Cool. So now on to some questions about this topic in general. And you mentioned earlier that, it's not just about facts and compiling spreadsheets and stuff, which is cool and everything, but more so about making your character stand out as a good Muslim in this society, and to show people the true meaning of Islam through the way we act, our words, etc. So the first question I have for you is that, following up from your list, right? Now this is a hard question. They all are, but this one, I'm not sure if there's one answer. There's many answers, but I would love to hear your opinion. So for some people, hearing Muslims condemn something just isn't enough for them. Yeah, like they see the list and they say, okay, 700 pages, okay, whatever, but they still have something in them that causes them to continuously spur hate speech and ignorant comments, and they have no interest to learn anything, right? And there's always going to be people like that. Sometimes their heart's open, sometimes they don't. And the majority of people aren't like that, alhamdulillah. They're very tolerant, amazing people. But some are they just don't quit. So for Muslims like yourself and myself, I'm here in the UK, you're over there in the US. What advice can you give to the young Muslims out there who might face this on a day-to-day basis? And rather than just getting angry and joining those Facebook threads, what advice can you give, and what would you advise them to do if something happens to them, perhaps in real life or at school or something?
Oh, that is a very loaded question, but I'll try to do it justice. To start off with, we all have those moments where it's easy to go off on social media, but we have to realize, like, are these people really worth your energy? When there's other people out there who are willing to learn, who want to learn, but they don't know what to do. I think one example of this is in the past year, due to the political situation, we had so many people reach out to our local masjid, our local mosque. And they were like, we want to learn. We've never met a Muslim before. Can we come in? And we had an open house, and we had over 1,000 visitors to the masjid that day. And I was like, these are the people that we should, really build dialogue with, instead of wasting our time on Twitter trolls. Because again, yes, there are times you kind of have to pick and choose your battles. There are times, and you can tell online by the way someone talks, if there's somebody who are willing to listen, even if they don't end up agreeing with you, they're willing to listen, as opposed to somebody who's going to continuously wallow in their bubble of hatred. And so it's realizing, those people, perhaps they're not worth your time. Instead, channel your energy into something that's going to make tangible differences. So, whether it's making a spreadsheet, or whether it's going to your local homeless shelter and doing something, or organizing a youth group with your masjid to go on a trip to, rebuild houses or something like that. So I think if you are able to look at it in terms of like, are these people worth my energy? And they're usually not. Instead, you should try to, it's much easier on your heart when you feel like you're doing something positive, rather than just trying to fire back witty comments in school and things like that. And it's very hard. I know I've had my moments in school where someone says something and your first response is just to be sarcastic or really witty, and sometimes you have to step back and be like, but in the end, did this change anything? Did this improve anything? Did this leave a mark on them? So instead, I've kind of, I know for me, what I do is when someone makes a really weird comment on campus, if I don't have time to talk to them, the first thing I say is, have a nice day, sir. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. And because I'm like, even that one sentence, maybe that'll make them sit down and realize, hey, I just said something mean to her and she told me to have a nice day. So even simple things like that. And then I go about my day. I feel good knowing that, alhamdulillah, I did my part, and inshallah, the rest is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So
awesome. So, to follow up this question, we talked about responding to people, but Muslims themselves who perhaps are just going around living their life and think that, me being any different is not going to make a difference, because people out there are always going to be mean. Bad things are always going to happen. I'm sick of condemning things. But do you think that, and you briefly did touch upon this in your answer in general, but is there anything that Muslims can do on a day-to-day basis in themselves, in their character, in their speech, to not like say, hey, everyone, I'm a Muslim, check me out, I'm not bad after all, but in terms of da'wah? So perhaps you can mention people that that inspire you, or things that you do personally in your life. I think you had a story you mentioned to me before as well about something, right? So how can Muslims themselves, I suppose, just exemplify what the Quran is and what the Quran says and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in their day-to-day lives?
Actions speak louder than words. And I think the one thing that we fall into, the trap that we fall into, is waking up feeling like unless we can change the whole world on like such a big level, we can't do anything. And especially when you're a kid, you're disenfranchised and you feel like you're disillusioned. You think, I want to do all these big things that everyone is doing. And it's like, no, change starts on a local level. And there was such a beautiful story. One of my friends was telling me about a brother who used to walk from campus to the masjid every single day. And every day as he was going, he would pick up trash. It would be Jummah, so he's like, let me just do something good. And he would pick up trash along the way. And there was another girl who would see him leave campus and always see him take the same path and always see him pick up trash. And she wondered, like, he doesn't have to do this. Why is he doing this? Where is he going? And so one day she was curious and she, followed him a little bit and saw that he entered the mosque. And she was like, okay. And a few days later, she visited the mosque and she learned more about Islam and eventually accepted it. And the brother never knew that this happened. And that's the kind of change that we have to exemplify. And it doesn't necessarily mean like bringing people to Islam, but at least moving their hearts and inspiring them to do something good. And so the brother never knew. And subhanAllah, imagine all the ajr that he gets from that. And he didn't even know. He didn't, he was just being himself. He was just happy to be a Muslim, and he was just carrying out anything he could do for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded him with this. So
don't underestimate small deeds, right? Whether it's trash, whether it's a smile. Because I've had people as well, like, you said earlier your hijab means that you're very obviously Muslim. This beard comes with the side effects as well, right? When I'm on the street and I'm in class and stuff on the bus, people look at you, and I have a habit of smiling all the time. I just smile at random people. Yeah. It's fun. Not in a creepy way, but like, like have a nice day kind of way, right?
Yeah.
That sounded really weird. But, and it's like when I smile at them, some of them are like surprised. Like, this guy actually smiles.
Oh, he can smile.
He can smile, right? And some people will look at me like this and then go, oh, hey. And then like their frown turns upside down, right? So I think even something as small as that. And you're right. I mean, even myself, for example, I've been inspired by people by accident as well. So you said this brother with the trash didn't mean to turn someone's heart towards Islam. Of course, Allah turns, but he inspired her, right? Even me, when it comes to living my life, I'm sometimes in a place, in the masjid or somewhere, and I'm observing people. And without them knowing, their mannerisms, the way they acted, the way they spoke to someone really hit me. And for years afterwards, I'll talk about them and praise them, right? And actually implement what they did in my life as well. So ajr everywhere, combo points, mashallah. So, so I want to now talk about those that we spoke about before, right? The people that are just everyday, normal citizens. They don't hate anybody. They're living their life. They're very tolerant people, mashallah, which, by the way, is the vast majority of people, right? Let's say they'll have Muslim colleagues, perhaps, friends, neighbours, or people of any faith for that matter, and they see what's happening in the media, they see all the hate speech, the hurtful comments, the violence, and they feel bad for their Muslim friends and colleagues. Let's speak to them for a second. So what advice would you give them when it comes to educating themselves or supporting the Muslims in their neighbourhood against people like this who do go out their way to show hostility all the time? What can they do to support their friends?
Reach out and don't be afraid to ask questions. There seems to be this idea on campus that when people do ask questions, which is not very often, unfortunately, but when they do ask questions, the first thing they'll start off with is, I don't mean any offense. I'm like, well, why would I be offended? I would rather have you come to me and ask me, even if it's, like something as blunt as, did your dad force you to wear, or something, I would rather have them come to me and ask me something than go on their way not knowing and not realizing what opportunity they could have had to maybe learn something. Even if I don't know something, I can refer you to someone who does. And that's the one thing, is it's not offensive to ask questions, especially if it's coming from a place of sincerity. So not being afraid to ask questions. And I'm sure your Muslim neighbors and your Muslim colleagues really appreciate that when you do ask questions. And you're like, oh, why do you fast? And, how many times a day do you pray? How do you pray? How do you feel when you pray? Things like that. And the other thing would be to reach out. And I have a friend, in high school, we didn't have a lot of Muslims in our grade. So I had quite a few non-Muslim friends and two really strict Catholic friends. And it was really funny because their parents were actually happy they were friends with the Muslim because they knew I wouldn't get up to any trouble or anything. And they're like, oh yeah, that's good. You're friends with the Muslim girl. But inshallah, we didn't get up into any trouble, but they tell me that oftentimes when they're with their families for gatherings and stuff, one of their family members will make a comment or something, and they'll be like, no, I know I have a Muslim friend and this is not true at all. So I think also having that responsibility of, even when we're not there, being able to speak truth to who we are, whether it's with other colleagues. If you hear a comment being made, unfortunately, the situation is sometimes if I say something, they might not listen. But if they listen to someone who's coming from a similar background, like, hey, this is a fellow Christian or a fellow Jewish person, they're more willing to listen. So I think it's also having that realization of being an ally and being able to speak truth to who we are as a community, even when you're not with us, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll tell you a story about what happened to me as well. And I think when you said that we appreciate questions, I love getting asked questions when it comes to people, my friends, my colleagues asking me about Islam, but with real like curiosity, right? And so I was at work one time and I said I had to go and pray. And it just suddenly sparks a conversation about, why is he going to pray? Why does he do it 5 times a day? Why is he soaking wet when he comes out of the bathroom? And then what ended up happening was that the manager in the place actually one day reminded me to pray and said, if I catch you praying late again, I'm going to give you in trouble. But she was being obviously sarcastic. And then she was like, I don't want to be offensive, but would you mind if I bought this clock and it has the call to prayer in it and I want to play it out loud in this office? Would you mind? And I was like, no, obviously. And I was like curious as to why she was doing it. I'm like, why? That's so random.
Subhanallah.
And to be honest, anticlimax, right? She got a really old clock with the most horrendous screechy audio player ever. So like I was so excited the adhan is going to be playing in the office full of non-Muslims, and then like one day she played it and the guy next to me was like, what is that noise? But anyway, she tried, right? So it works both ways, because she was curious about me and then I was curious about her, like why do you want to do this? But turns out she's visited places and she's very interested in stuff, so it works both ways.
Mashallah.
All right, cool.
Yeah, and it has to be both ways. And that's the other thing, is sometimes as Muslims we shy away from opening these conversations. We kind of want to be low key in the background, and that's the thing, is people appreciate it. If you are proud of who you are and you're proud of your faith, people see that in you and they are attracted to that. They gravitate towards that. So I think it does have to be a two-way street, is for people to be willing to ask questions, but also for us to be willing to open those conversations in the first place. I know I used to be very shy in high school. I don't want to talk about religion. I don't want to talk about any of this. But then you get to a point where it's like, yeah, it plays a huge part in my life. And I'm very happy to share it with anyone who's curious.
All right. So lastly, let's speak to the young Muslims out there who are watching this. And I assume they turned this podcast on to be inspired. I hope so anyway. So
Inshallah.
the whole point of this show today, and the reason that I asked you to come on here, is because, and I think the reason why Imam Omar contacted you and had you apply for the program as well, is because being a confident Muslim, I think, is so important in today's climate. You live in the US, which I believe and I can see is a little bit crazy right now, as is the UK. A little bit. We each have our ups and downs, to put it lightly.
Yeah.
And so I want to paint a scenario for you, right? Which might happen, and I think it does happen very often. And
yes.
I want to see what you would do. So let's say you're in the masjid, there's a community event there, and you see a young sister, a little bit younger than you, in her teens perhaps, right? Just starting high school. And she used to wear hijab, but you notice that now she took it off, right? Now, you're not going to ask her how she is and, interrogate her about her hijab, but you go to her and see how she's getting on. And then you can see that something's bothering her. She looks really sad. And so you ask her what's going on. And she says, you know what, Hira? I just don't want to be a Muslim anymore. I'm not proud of my faith. I'm scared. I see what's happening. And when I have my hijab on, I feel vulnerable. And I just don't think I want to be a part of this anymore. And so, of course, that's very heartbreaking. But I think a lot of Muslims do go through this. For someone like that, who either has gone through that transition or is thinking like that or feeling like that, what advice can you give to them, and how can you encourage them to continue to be young, confident Muslims, even if they don't have the intention to go and make a list or be active in the community, but just in themselves, you know?
Oh, that is a very loaded question. And you know, actually on campus, I was faced with a situation similar to this, a sister who was struggling. And I think the one thing to establish is to make sure that they don't feel alone. Oh, bismillah. is to establish that they don't feel alone, that their fear is valid, that, you know, nobody should coming at them and making them feel like they shouldn't feel that way. That is the worst thing you can do, is make someone feel like their feelings are wrong. And letting her know that she's not alone. I myself have also gone through times where my iman is at a low. I feel like I can't go on. And one thing you can't, it's hard because you have to think about the situation a person's in, and it's not always going to be the same as yours, but express that I'm going to try and understand. I may not understand, but I'm going to try to understand, and inshallah we can work through this together, that you're not alone in this. And one thing to point out is that living for the people, it gives you nothing, but when you live for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you have the best ally on your side, which is Allah, the Almighty, and He is the one who controls everything. So when you, even if that doesn't have to mean, you know, going back out there and declaring I'm a Muslim in front of everyone, but even doing small things to work towards that goal of I'm doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts mercy in that. He puts His blessings in that. And the other thing from a more social standpoint is when we have situations like this where we feel like we have to fit in, otherwise we're going to be hurt. If it's not your hijab, it's your skin color. If it's not your skin color, it's your name. If it's not your name, it's going to be something else. And I actually had one of my Christian friends point out, she's like, Hira, my whole life I felt like I didn't fit in and I look like everybody else. So I can't imagine the position you're in, right? So
that's true.
Yeah, so this is something that you see. There's so many articles and books out there. And I actually work with a child psychologist on campus. And she's like, this is when you realize that everybody has the same goal of wanting to be liked and wanting to feel acceptance, you kind of build this idea of, okay, how can we have, it comes from ourselves. It comes from, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but being able to look at people's differences and be happy. There's always this idea of they're just like us. And I kind of think that's a little bit flawed, because it's not, the strength doesn't lie in our similarities. The strength lies in our differences, but being able to accept those differences. That's what makes us beautiful. Unity is not about being the same. Unity is about people of all backgrounds and cultures being able to come together. So that's, you know, sort of the big picture. And if I were to give, this sister advice, I would tell her, like, you have the best ally on your side, alhamdulillah. And, you know, it's okay to be scared, but, you know, getting the help you need, finding good friends, finding good people to be with, and not letting that control your life, not letting that fear control your life.
Jazakallah khair for those inspiring words. I think you'd make her at least smile and feel better with that answer. And yeah, I mean, I think I had the same advice pretty much. There's Muslims out there, even myself sometimes, you know, I'm contemplating, should I keep this beard? And I think we all go through our battles. And I would say as well, as a follow-up bit of advice for those out there who are comfortable in their own skin, is to not judge other people as well. Because we sometimes, you know, think, how can that person be so weak? Who cares what the news says? Who cares, you know, what the president or the prime minister says? Just be yourself. But for some people, it's difficult to be comfortable immediately, but they do get there eventually, right? So I think as well,
Inshallah.
supporting
and it's not a race. It's not a race. And that's the other thing to be careful of, is like, we have our own path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's not all going to look the same. It's not a linear thing, like I have to do this before I do this, before I do this. You know, I may be wearing hijab, but I struggle with a lot of other things, you know. You may have a beard that doesn't make you immune to any of these other fears that we face, right? And this is aside from situations in which there's actual, you know, imminent threat.
Okay, cool.
Not that.
So thank you again for your insights. Now, before I let you go, is there anything else that we haven't said today that you want to mention to those out there watching or listening? Any last words of advice, or do you want to do a cheeky plug of any projects you're working on? And
I mean, I'm just trying to sleep these days. But alhamdulillah, I hope that anyone listening feels inspired to do something. You don't wake up thinking you're going to change the world, but wake up with the intention of changing even one person's world, because that's what really matters in the end. And besides that, puns are awesome. You should follow me on Twitter for my really, really awesome puns and my sense of humor, inshallah. And I'm hoping I also do YouTube videos on a variety of different topics, everything from just cooking, hijabs, to more serious videos. So inshallah, that is something we can definitely connect on.
Awesome. And guys, we will put everything in today's show notes, inshallah. Sister Hira's Twitter profile with all those extra puns, and her YouTube channel.
Phenomenal.
As well. Yeah. I have to say they are pretty entertaining, if I say so myself. And also her YouTube channel, so you can follow her on those platforms, inshallah. I forgot to ask you one last thing. MuslimsCondemn.com. What's the future of this project? So from what I understand, you are adding to it as the days go on, right? So when Muslims condemn more things, the list becomes more populated. But is it just going to be an online project? Are you going to do anything else? What's the vision for the future, inshallah?
Inshallah. So after the list went viral, it was picked up by the Bridge Initiative at Georgetown University, which is kind of like a project dedicated to combating Islamophobia, and just kind of educating people about Islam. And so it was picked up by them because they had a similar thing going where it was much shorter than mine, I will say, but they had been documenting instances as well. So we decided to pool our resources together, inshallah. And alhamdulillah, the list is a part of their project. Moving forward, we're hoping to embellish the website and kind of work with data visualization. So one idea that came up was making a map, interactive map, where you could kind of look at where these instances are coming from around the world and get details, instead of just having a huge list and having to scroll down. So that was one idea, and inshallah, it's a little bit of a slow process just because I am also a student, but we're hoping to get that off the ground soon. And yeah.
Awesome. Keep up the good work, and I pray that Allah continues to bless the project and, grants you more viral tweets, whether it's your puns or whether it's more projects and stuff. Thank you so much for being here on the show. It's been a pleasure, and I pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connects us again in the future. I think I can perhaps assume that in the next couple of years we'll be doing some major things, if not, more exciting projects. So I hope to have you back on the show then. But until then, inshallah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for having me on.
Alright guys, so that was Sister Hira Hashmi, mashallah, with some fantastic advice, a great story, and of course a very inspiring project. I mean, what an amazing thing to do, right? And I hope that inshallah for all you guys out there listening who, aren't sure how to respond to such statements and hurtful comments made by people out there, that you become inspired now to, be more proactive and not just reactionary, not just being angry, joining Facebook and Twitter debates, but doing something meaningful. And even if you don't want to go out there and make a 700-page long list, or go out and actively speak to people, then just in yourself, in your character, and who you are, how you conduct yourself with your friends, your family, your colleagues, at work or at school, that is inshallah going to make a world of difference. Now, in the episode, Hira did mention a number of links, whether it was her Twitter account, YouTube account, the Yaqeen Institute, where you can go and check out their project, check out her award as well. You can find all of those links, inshallah, and a summary to today's episode in the show notes for today's show, which is going to be right here on the screen right now, or in the description below. So definitely go there, check it out, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you what your opinions are, and if you have any of your own advice or stories or ideas on how we can be more proactive and inspire the youth out there to stay strong and to, follow the Quran and Sunnah the way it should be. And that is enough to inspire even just one person out there and turn their hearts, inshallah, towards thinking more positively about Islam. Guys, until next time, have an awesome day, and make sure you subscribe to the podcast. We have many more episodes coming out, and we live on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube as well, mashallah, or over at deinspiration.com. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allah, Allah. Whoa, that was good.
Allah, 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 Allah,